Um,
I love it.
okay, so before we like get into like more of the serious thing, would you mind sharing like why you became a coach at all? Because that's something I never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I actually went through a divorce after 30 years of marriage, an unexpected
Oh God.
divorce. And I know it really came out of nowhere for me. And I would have to say, even for my ex. And so when I was going through it, I couldn't find resources. I was going to therapy, which is great. I'm a huge believer in therapy.
Absolutely.
But they were asking me questions like, well, why do you want someone who doesn't want you? And I couldn't answer that question, but all I knew was I did still want to be in this relationship. And then I felt like there was something wrong with me for still loving someone who had hurt me so deeply.
Mhm.
I felt like I had to collect my own resources. And what I did was I just kind of traveled this path. And as I went along, I started to take note of what felt good for me, what didn't, and just allowing myself to have all of these emotions without feeling the judgment that I felt was coming from around me, even from people who I loved, not realizing they didn't know how to help either. Most people don't know how to help. And that's how I started. And then one of my sons said to me, get on social media and tell your story. And I thought, oh, this is crazy. So
Mhm.
I went on TikTok first
Oh,
and foremost, and I started to just talk about this is the hardest thing to go through. And immediately people were like, yes, yes, it is. And then it just grew. It grew.
oh,
So
God. Were you expecting it to blow up? So like that was your.
never, never. I was just looking to share and almost get support there. And all of a sudden, it turned into
You
my
became the
passion
hero.
and my purpose. It turned into my purpose.
You are helping millions. I can't even say this enough, but
So
seriously,
fun.
you actually have my friend get through a breakup as well. So I'm just putting
Did
that.
I really? That's
I
fantastic. That
am.
makes me so happy. I think I give this safe space for people to say, I'm having all of these emotions and I can't figure them out. But what do I do with them? And I think it's a safe space to say, you're going to process every one of them and not try to deny your natural feelings.
No, absolutely. Actually, I think you're one of the only people like there is no shame there when I come onto your page. Like otherwise, like there's always this shame and this inner voice that's talking. But I feel like the minute I'm here, I'm like there's no shame, there's no
Uh, no
judgment.
judgment.
Yeah.
I love that you get that from my page because that's exactly what I try to get out there. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's what resonates. The people, even in the comment section, are the ones basically saying, I'm not afraid to tell my story here because I feel safe here, not judge. Because I'm never going to tell people, oh, you need to be stronger than that. And you need to know your worth. And I'm never going to say that because you don't feel that right after a break up. You don't even feel close to understanding your value. Oh,
Absolutely not. Actually, with regards to that, let's say the first very like day and like that first very week after a breakup, like how would you suggest someone like gets through that very tough little period because it's terrible. Like you can't get out of your bed. It's just like that bad. I mean, that could be different for everyone. I don't know. That was something for me, but I'm not sure if that's the same thing for everyone.
for most people, the first week is excruciating because you really go into a crisis. I really like to call it a breakup crisis. You can't eat, you
Mhm.
can't sleep, your thoughts are racing. It's very difficult to be in control. And most of the time, you're also, a lot of people are almost begging their person back, trying to explain to them what a good couple you were and you can make it through anything. And there's this desperation that you go through. So most people are going to lose it in the first month or so. And I want them to be okay with that. I want them to feel like even if they did everything they needed to do, and I often say you write them poetry and you write them songs and you show up at their work and beg them back and call their parents and you do all of these things. And I want people to know that that's completely normal and be okay with that because that does pass in a little bit of time. So your job, even in the first few weeks, is to just do your best to understand you're not going to be in control of a lot of those emotions. Seek support immediately. There's always a friend or a family member or someone who is either going through it or has been through it. Lean on them. Don't try to navigate all by yourself, because
Mhm.
that's a really difficult place. And what we do is we sometimes try to get our ex to be the one to soothe us and regulate our emotions. And they're just on the other end of the spectrum at that point. They can't do it, but we reach for them because they hold the answer. They hold the answer to calming us down.
So in that case, I mean, I've seen a lot of people being friends with their exes if I'm like right after the breakup, if I'm being fair.
I love that you said that. That's a great point. And okay, the ex is usually saying that they want to stay friends for a few different reasons.
Right.
Number one, they may do it just to soften the blow and say, we could be friends. Let's try that. They're not really wanting to be friends. Other times they're doing it because they don't want to let their person go all the way. So
Right.
even if they're breaking up with them, they're kind of on the fence. And so they're like, hey, let's just stay friends, because they get a lot, from their ex. So the person who does the breaking up does that for a few different reasons. The
Mhm.
person on the other end of the breakup wants to stay friends because it's our only attachment left to them. And we are so afraid of cutting ties totally that we will usually say yes. We'll usually say yes because letting go is too painful, too painful.
Yeah, absolutely. I, okay, okay, so usually I know that's how usually it works, but has it like what about cases when you break up with someone toxic, right? Like you're the one
Mhm.
initiating a breakup with someone toxic, and that's
Right.
obviously not something you would want, but you know they're not good for you. So what would you recommend in a case like that?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is difficult too, because when someone is breaking up with someone who, like you said, is toxic, as much as we know we have to have the breakup, we still have a lot of love for this person, because no one is 100% a villain. So
Right.
there is a lot about this person who we really love, and they have been part of our life. So we're familiar. There is a history. So breaking up with someone who's toxic is very difficult to actually go in the other direction. We may sometimes need to keep them in our lives at some level, because again, totally walking away is very scary for us. So if we know our limits and we're breaking up with this person, but we still feel this unhealthy attachment to them, building a life outside of them while all this is going on is what we need to do. We can't wait to feel better to start building a life outside of them. We have to start building that life outside of them while we are still in the middle of this push and pull with that ex who just seems to have a hold of this grip on us that we can't break free of. We have to build up again first before we really have the ability to cut those ties. We can't do it just by, wishing it's going to happen and having this willpower is usually non-existent in a breakup. Let's be honest. There's zero.
It's you. It's usually like people around you that sort of push you in such cases. They're like, hey, we don't see you being happy, or like maybe you should do something about that. So, yeah,
and,
like
and you may even know, yeah, and you may even know you're not really happy, but you're familiar. And there's something about being a couple. We're very afraid to be alone. We're very afraid to be on our own. So sometimes people settle because it's good enough. They feel like, well, I have a date on a Saturday night. I have someone to go with me to functions, and there's the societal pressure to be a couple. So a lot of times we will kind of hang in there, even if we know it's not the happiest place for us. Making that break is a lot easier. It's a lot easier for someone to come in and tell you, look, I don't see you happy in this relationship. You need to make a break. And even if you believe it to be true, making that break, that takes a long time, and it's so hard to do. If we're being honest, it's so
yeah,
hard to do.
very hard to do. And even like I mean this I think goes for both ways, but like that especially if you like go no contact. So if you're the one initiating it or they're the one initiating it, either way, it just like it sucks. So how would you suggest for both ways? Because I think blocking and being blocked both are a very different feeling, but then again, you're still grieving in a very different way. So how would you recommend?
Yeah, that no contact is such it's so important to talk about because I think everybody feels as though they need to go no contact.
Hmm.
That's not always the case, especially if we feel like if the person broke up with us because of sometimes reasons other than the relationship. For example, they're going through a very difficult time. They are dealing with a family member that has an illness, or they are going through a job loss, or they're moving, or they're graduating.
Hmm.
Sometimes there are outside things going on that the person feels like they need a breakup. In
Hmm.
those cases, contact is sometimes the way back together because all they're trying to do is kind of take the pressure off the relationship because they feel like they have no emotional energy for that relationship. So, in that case, once you take the pressure off the relationship, if you keep them in your life a little bit, and I know that's very difficult to do, sometimes the road back is just like that. They kind of get their life in order on the other side. They start coming back your way, and then you can reconnect. So, in those cases, I feel like contact actually helps you. In the no contact situation,
Hmm.
this is individual as well. It is the most difficult thing someone can ever do after a breakup. If people have ever been there, they know it feels like a withdrawal because it is a withdrawal. It is going without the person who has been your lifeline for a period of time. So it's a very difficult decision to make, but it pays dividends a lot quicker. Because after a breakup, I use these timelines. They're not scientific, but they seem to work in a lot of different positions.
Yeah.
After a breakup, the person doing the breaking up, it takes them about 3 to 6 months after the breakup to realize what they've lost,
Hmm.
what that person really means to them, what the reasons for the breakup were. So they kind of renegotiate it months after the breakup. But if you go no contact, they will usually get there sooner because no contact makes someone feel the consequences of those actions. Like, okay, you want this breakup. Now, this is exactly what it feels like. This is the loss of me, the absolute loss, not just when you call and I answer and you have me at arm's length. This is what it feels like. So it gets somebody into that realness a lot quicker. And
Right.
for the person who, mm, the person who was maybe broken up with or did the breaking up, for them, it also gets them into a place of learning to live without their ex, making the choices every day to soothe themselves, to regulate their emotions, to stabilize. So then they also get into a place of feeling like, okay, now I've been 30 days without my ex. I know I don't need them like I needed oxygen. I don't need them to survive. I can survive every single day on my own. Now, do I want them? Were they healthy for me? Were they a good partnership? You start to look at that relationship with much more logic than you did when you were in the middle of all of that chaos. So, no contact works very quickly, but it is the hardest thing. You will feel like you are in withdrawal. Making it through your days of no contact, it's excruciating. You need a lot of support there. It's I just the thought of it. I think my very first video was me trying to go no contact with my ex. I think my first video was, hey, let's go on a 30-day no contact journey. Well, that never panned out because I could never be successful at no contact.
Oh,
I'm
really?
still healed, but it took me a lot
Did you reach
longer. But
out?
yes, what?
Did you reach out?
He kept reaching out to me.
Oh, wow.
So like it was one of those cases where he let me go, but he didn't really let me go, and I was in the middle
That's
of what do I
sad.
do?
That's so, oh my God, it's not okay. Oh, and plus it happened on the blue moon, right? So it's so confusing. Like,
And I think that happens sometimes when someone has a breakup and they break up with you because of reasons other than the actual couple. Like I said, a lot of times someone will have a breakup because of their own struggles individually, maybe with some childhood trauma, maybe with some events going on in their life. They
mhm,
break up with you thinking that's somehow going to solve their problems. But then the breakup doesn't solve any of those problems. And then they do start reaching back to you because you weren't actually the problem. So
right.
there's a lot of reasons why someone who breaks up with you will, in a little bit of time, start to say, wait a minute, like, was that the right decision? Why did I make this choice? And is there a way that we can kind of figure this out? So you never know what way a breakup is going to go. You just don't.
You're one of the only people that actually encourages that because I mean I'm not dissing people that are out there like encouraging you to be your best version, right? But it's not possible for everyone, and I've seen many cases where like people get back together and they do get like married and things work out just fine. So do you believe in second chances? Like,
I do. I absolutely, really, really do. Because, like you just said, most people that you talk to who are in a long term relationship or even married, they've had one or two breakups
uh
along the way because we are human and we're trying to figure out the other person. And a lot of us do come in with our own issues and problems and challenges that don't necessarily have to do with the other person, but they bubble over into the relationship and create static and problems. And so when we have a breakup does end up being the blessing in the end. I know you can never say that to someone just going through a breakup because we don't want to hear that, but it does, because a breakup will crack you wide open to take a look at yourself and what you brought into that relationship, and also what your partner could also be dealing with in that. So if you have a breakup and do some growing, some personal growth, you stretch, you really figure a lot of things out about yourself, about your person, you can come back at such a higher level than you were even before. So I 1000% believe in second chances, especially because I feel like we're always pushed into this corner of, if someone breaks up with you, you need to shut the door. And if they didn't know what they had, then you shouldn't give them the time of day. But if we just stay away because somebody tells us to stay away, we may always wonder, what if? What if we got back and we could have solved that problem? And I feel like that is a lot harder to live with than if you say to yourself, you know what, we had a pretty good foundation, we had some problems, but I really feel like I want to try again with this person. I love them and I believe in us.
Mhm.
If you get back in there and try again and then it doesn't work and you can't figure it out, you can close the door much easier because you've honored yourself.
Right.
Even if you have another broken heart, you will survive it. You survived a broken heart the first time. And the more you get together and break up, the more something inside of you will say, if it doesn't work out, I'm done. Like, I can't do it anymore. Only you know that day. Only you. No one can tell you when that day comes. No one. So I'm a firm believer in as many chances as you need, you go for it. Someone's going to be there to mop you up. I will.
I was just gonna say that. You wait.
I will.
I love the optimism and the support.
I feel like the people that I work with absolutely heal more completely when they process it all the way through and
Mhm.
go down every avenue to see if they could somehow put this back on track. When they come to the end, if it doesn't work out, they are sad, yes, but so much closer to acceptance without any doubt in their mind because they've done everything they could do. That's a lot easier to live with than the
Right.
people who don't come back because of maybe fear, peer pressure, ego, all those things. They live with a regret that they have to carry, and that's a lot harder.
A
It's a
lot.
lot harder.
It's a lot hard. So
Hmm.
in that context, like, how do you deal with the what if, right? Now, let's say you broke up and probably the foundation wasn't that great, but you know, there's a part of you that always wants to believe something might change, or you might change, or they might change, or something changes. How do you deal with that sort of cognitive dissonance, like in your head, like, oh, I shouldn't go back, I should go back, I shouldn't go back, I should go back, like um
Right. Yeah. And that's something that plagues a lot of people from very early on, is the choice of, do I give up hope? Do I walk away? Or do I keep pushing for this relationship? Because people feel as though they really can't put their life back together again until they make one of those decisions. But I always say your life plays itself out in a little bit of time. So if
Mhm.
you aren't sure what direction to go in, don't fight the feelings of, you hope you get back together again, you still love this person. Those are your natural feelings, and you can have all of those, But at the same time, start going in your own direction of rebuilding your life daily.
Mhm.
Start auditing your life. Look at your finances. Look at your health and wellness. Look at your friend circle. Look at your job satisfaction. Start to really tackle the parts of your life that you kind of let go while you were in the relationship, because that's going to keep you building yourself back up, getting more independent, and healing without having to feel like you need to make a choice in the other direction.
Mhm.
And then as time starts to play out, if you want to reach out to your ex every so often to see how they are, what they're up to, or if they reach out to you every so often, you're
Right.
going to see over time if you either start working your way back, or
Mhm.
if you continue on a road away from each other. Yeah, and if you continue on the road away from each other, you do get to a point at some level where you say, you know what, we just couldn't figure it out. We love each other, but some people don't make the changes that we need to get that relationship back on track. But if you are getting yourself stronger independently through that journey, you
Mhm.
can accept it when it finally gets there. If you just keep sitting watching your ex and their life play out, you're going to be frozen in your grief. You're going to be frozen and you're not going to know the answer. But keep moving yourself forward, making a choice anytime you want to. You know, if you want to reach out to an ex, and that's a great thing to talk about too. You know,
Mhm.
people always ask, reaching out to your ex, who reaches out to who?
Right.
And this has to do with your healing process too. It doesn't matter in my eyes who reaches out to who. Usually people feel as though the person who reaches out to you should be the first one to, I mean, I'm sorry, the person who breaks up with you should be the first one to reach out to see if you can get back together again. But a
Mhm.
lot of times I work with the people who do the breaking up.
Uh-huh.
And when they get a little bit outside of that relationship, if they start to question, I think I made a mistake, I would love to talk to them again, they follow it up by saying, I don't think I have a right to reach out to them. I broke their heart. I really hurt them. I
Mhm.
think they're healing. I don't want to interrupt that process. I made my bed. Now I have to lie in it. They think of a million different reasons why they shouldn't reach out to that person. And they also feel like that person may not want to talk to them at all. They're afraid the person really has some, angry feelings toward them, which sometimes they do. So what I usually, even if I'm pushing them to reach out and they don't want to, I feel like if the other person,
Mhm.
after a few months' time, even just opens that door a crack by checking in, just saying, "Hey, it's the holiday season. I just wanted to say hello. Hope you're doing well." That's all they need. Then they come rushing through that door to meet them at, "How are you? It's so good to hear from you." And then you have a reconnection.
Action, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, how do you deal with that? Okay, I don't know if I'm able to frame this right, but like the initial stage where you're in complete denial, that can take so long. It can take so long. It can take months, sometimes a year. How do you get through the denial, I would say?
The denial is the longest stage, I would say. That really is a place of, you know, it's happening. You're not denying that, but you can't believe it's happening. You're in this state of shock. Like, is this really my life? You know, you wake up every morning. Is this really happening? And it's very difficult to get to the place of seeing that it's happening and realizing that this is the way it's going to go. Our heart and our mind isn't ready. And that's why I think denial is a part of the grieving process. It really keeps us from the full effect of what's happening. We can't take the weight of what's actually happening. So while you're in denial, again, kind of let the time play out. Realize
Okay.
that the first 3 to 6 months, there's not going to be a lot of change. If that person has made a choice to go in the other direction, they're not going to even be considering most of the time coming back your way. So we can't look at the first few months as being any place where there's change going to be happening. We almost have to say the first few months, there's no change. Then, as we start to get into the 3 to 6 month mark, sometimes the person is turning the corner and revisiting it. So
Mhm.
if after 6 months or so, that person is not having any change of heart, something inside of us realizes this, and our hope starts to fade naturally. And once the hope starts to fade naturally because they're not coming back around, we hit even a deeper level of grief. And I don't want to scare anybody because people feel like I'm getting worse. I feel like I'm getting worse. but they're not getting worse. What's happening is they're coming out of that denial, and they're starting to see, oh my gosh, like they're not figuring it out. They're not coming back around. We may not have that second chance. And then we hit a very deep level of sadness because
Mhm.
it's not coming around. But that is actually the jumping point into the next stage of healing, where we start to almost accept, we're not coming back around. This is terrible. This is so sad. But then we start to accept it. So that denial is going to work itself through you at its own pace. We can't speed it up. All we can do is accept that we cannot accept the breakup yet. We can say, I don't accept it. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. This should have never happened.
Honestly, that's very relatable. And so, do you really think there is something called like the right time, or because people sort of have this peer pressure where like, hey, it's been like 8 months, I think I should move on, or come on, like it's been too long. So do you think there's like a timeline that
I I do in some sense. I do, because like we talk about, the 3 to 6 months
right?
is where usually the person who does the breaking up starts to reconsider. Even if they're in a new relationship, that doesn't make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
They're still reconsidering what it is they left behind. So that's the window where a lot of people can have better conversation, even understanding why the breakup happened. So I feel like anything after 6 months, if someone is going 8 months to a year or even longer, and they're still in this place of, what is my ex thinking? Like, where are they? Are they just staying away for, reasons? Are they afraid to reach out to me? Are they thinking about me? Where are they? If
Mm-hmm.
you feel stuck at that level, that's where I feel like you can reach out at any time. And I'm going to tell you why that is.
Okay.
If we feel frozen and stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't know what direction this is going in, and especially if we're still holding out hope that this person may come back, if we reach out in any way,
Mm-hmm.
their response is going to tell us exactly where they are. And even if they don't respond, or they give you a cold response, that's going to break our hearts, yes, but it is also going to push us further in the direction of getting out of denial and more into, this is not working out. So, as painful as it is, it pushes you. And then in the other direction, if you should reach out and reconnect in any way and things go positively, that starts pushing you back together again. So I believe if anyone feels stuck at a certain time,
Mm-hmm.
they don't need to feel the peer pressure of doing what other people are telling them to do. If they feel like, I can't move forward, I feel stuck, I need to know, then they have to sit with that and first realize reaching out to an ex is going to reopen that wound. Like it or not, communication will reopen that wound. But most people are ready at that time because they can't sit anymore in that limbo that we have of the not knowing. That limbo is really, really tough and draining. It's exhausting. So when I work with people, if they feel ready at that point to reach out, I will tell them, go for it. If you just want to say hello, their response is going to tell you everything you need to know. And it does. And then you redirect your steps. Then you keep going, because not everybody works it out. Not everybody gets to their highest, best self and decides, I have the tools to get back in there. Let's try this again. Some really do kind of sit in the breakup and go in the other direction. So you can take control of the breakup, even if you were the one broken up with, by reaching out whenever you want to. And I know that's scary.
No,
And I know people will say, never ever do that. I believe in following your own lead. You know when it's right. Because I also like the quote, when you don't know what to do nothing. If you really don't know what to do nothing.
okay.
And when you wake up one day and you say, I can't take it anymore, I need to say hello to them, go say hello. Say hello.
I love that because this limbo and this sort of what if can like really pull you down so much. And I think
It can
sometimes
last for years. It really can.
like maybe getting an answer might just help that. But then again, I don't think if you like get an answer that you probably don't want to like listen to, you probably wouldn't. So
Right. You're so right. And if you give yourself enough time,
Mhm.
you're out of right after a breakup. Our logic really isn't playing a role in our decision making. We only need that person back because that's all we know, and we're in a very desperate state. But
Yeah.
as months go on, you are in a much more logical state, so you're usually not pursuing a very unhealthy partner months and years after a breakup. You usually are only still in it because there are things about them that you feel like the relationship can be repaired. Our logic does start to come back over some months. And so we're in a much better place to make good decisions for ourselves, not so much in the first few weeks. Logic has left the building in the first few months.
Or like everything just seems like golden at that point, and like
Yes.
yeah, like everything's perfect, and you feel like you've lost everything, but then like your emotions take over your logic, like you said. So yeah.
They really do. They really do because when someone does leave us, we feel like we're drowning. We really do. We can't even take a breath without that person. The sadness, we feel like it's going to last forever. The heaviness of your heart, the sadness, you really do feel like the saddest person on the planet. It's one of the hardest things anyone ever goes through. And that's why I want people to take it seriously. Don't minimize just because it's under the word breakup. I think people skim over it because they don't think it's anywhere near some of the major life events that can um, really hurt us. And it is up there because it's an identity crisis on top of everything else. Our identity was found in that person, and we have to start from the bottom, building ourselves up again and creating a new identity. And that's why you see a lot of people jump into something new right away just
Mhm.
to maintain their identity. It's too difficult to be kind of floating out there by yourself. So a breakup is major, major.
I would go as far as to say that it even feels like death sometimes, like that grief feels like.
I agree. I agree. And because it is grief like a death in the way that you're losing a very important person. And it's compounded because when you have a death, that person loved you, you loved them, you chose to be in one another's lives. And when that person passes away, that was by circumstance, not by choice. And there's some sort of a closure there. With a breakup, this is someone choosing to not be in your life anymore. And that is such a different kind of a grief. And they have the ability to hurt you over and over and over again because they're still here. So it is grief. It is so compounded in that way. It is a loss of a very important person, but then it's by choice and not by circumstance. And that is just so heartbreaking. And the pain doesn't end. When they get into that new relationship, when they are not choosing you over and over, the pain just keeps going on and on and on. Oh,
How do you deal with that though? Like you're seeing your ex-partner like being with someone new, because that can be very difficult to deal with.
when you see them with someone new, you really have to sit in your own confidence about knowing that they pick someone else at that moment first of all, if they do it right out of the breakup, that's for a survival. That is really to distract and to numb. It's how they feel as though they should move themselves forward. People are trying to put together a new life. So a lot of people are going to immediately put someone else in place. That does not diminish your value or who you are. It's just how they are coping to move themselves forward. So it's really important to not look at this new person is better and they're more and they're the chosen one. It's usually someone just trying to push forward in their life, having nothing to do with you. So don't put yourself in this imaginary race with this new person that they put in place. Get really confident about who you are and what you brought to that relationship. And you really have to start loving yourself again in that way, which is really difficult to do, but focus on all the things that they loved about you and your friends love about you and your family loves about you, and start to get more into that and not in the competition. And I do want to make a point that's a little more specific.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you're the healthier partner and you get broken up with, which is a very common breakup, when
Right.
someone isn't quite at your level and they feel like they're struggling to sustain your value system, your way of doing things, your priorities, they may break up with you even though you're a very healthy partner.
Mhm.
If they break up with you in that way, water is going to find its level. They may get into another relationship where the person isn't necessarily at your level. Maybe the other person doesn't have healthy communication. Maybe they're not able to be as vulnerable. We don't know if people go to a new relationship because it's less work, because that does happen a lot, and people will settle where there's less. So does it have the substance you had? Probably not. So I often say sometimes people level down out of relationships. And I don't mean that in any way of like looks and things like that. But if someone has trouble staying at your level or even close, they're going to feel an ease going somewhere else where maybe they don't have to communicate very well. They don't have to be fully connected. They don't have to be vulnerable. And that's because of what they deal with on a daily basis. And
Right.
so I see a lot of people kind of slipping away from a very healthy partner and kind of settling elsewhere where it's a little easier on them to just be themselves. We know who our ex is. So we have to stop believing that they get into this new relationship and now they are, the greatest
Good.
person ever. Like all of a sudden they're doing everything they never did for you. That's temporary. They are who they are. We are who we are. So we have to get away from the fantasy that someone new is going to bring them to their highest, best self. People only change when they want to change. And most people, they aren't doing that kind of work. They really aren't. Most people really aren't doing that work. So we have to stay grounded in our ex is our ex, and we know them better than anyone. They
Mhm.
didn't transform into
Right.
the perfect partner. No one has that magic wand, least of all the next person. So they are who they are. We have to remind ourselves and stay away from romanticizing that person too, because we have a tendency to do that, put them on a pedestal when they don't belong there.
How do you recommend actually trying to break that? Because we either tend to like demonize them or like put them on a pedestal, right? That black and white sort of thinking where you can
So
fluctuate.
true. That's a great point. And when we see ourselves kind of getting to that place of romanticizing them, it's really important to bring them back down to the realness. So keeping a little bit of a list of their pros and cons is a good idea.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's true because we do start to forget. We paint ourselves as being Romeo and Juliet, and bet money we weren't. We weren't. So when we remind ourselves of the negatives, it isn't to villainize them. I love that you put it that way. It's really to remind us of this is who they are, and that serves a few purposes. Number one, if you get back together again, that's usually what you have to work on in order to get that relationship back on track. But
Mhm.
number two, if you get into a new relationship, those negatives are usually going to be your deal breakers now. So it
Right.
is important to not go one way or the other. We have to realize that this person has two parts to them. And that's when you come into when you were speaking about cognitive dissonance. This person has two sides to them. We cannot just focus on one or the other. We have to do our best to bring those two sides together. And I think that's the challenge after the breakup, because our head wants to believe in, we can see what they've done, we understand the parts of them that didn't really click, but our heart only sees the best, the expectations we have for them, the possibilities.
Mhm.
So saying to yourself, yeah, they have all of these good qualities, but hey, they have these things too. And these were kind of our deal breakers, and create that one single person who is both of those things.
I think that's pretty difficult to do, but it's so important to understand that people are a whole and kind of have to take like the dual nature into account because I don't believe anyone's a complete like monster, complete,
Right.
we're all human, so I don't know.
Yeah, and some of the times that you're thinking about the different parts of that person, it's
Mhm.
really good to recognize what are problems with their skill set that can actually be worked on, because a lot of times there are things that someone can work on, trying to communicate better, trying to not be so selfish. trying to work through maybe some trust issues that they had in previous relationships. There are things that they can absolutely work on, that we know that there can be growth. But then there are things to look at when it comes to character and value system. I feel like if your value systems align, most things can be worked through. If they don't align, the way we prioritize people, and those are the things to really look at, because some changes we're able to make, other changes are a lot more difficult. A lot.
And
Mhm.
two more questions I just wanted to. So, how do you okay, let's say you've broken up, it's been a while and you're trying to move on. That feeling of going out with someone new, right? Because that's a whole level of acceptance. Like now there is no going back, you know. Like, finally
That's a
going back now.
that's a great one, because usually there are these conflicting feelings when we start getting out there and dating, especially if we still have a lot of feelings towards our ex. Number
Mhm.
one, people worry about, if I start dating, am I going to ruin the chances of getting back with my ex? Is
Mhm.
that going to, ruin it? And no, it's not, because you're in a breakup, you are allowed to go out and try to push yourself forward and heal and go in that direction. So feeling that way, it's going to happen. You don't have to feel guilty about it. You know that this is something you need to do to push yourself forward. Then it's going to be very difficult for someone new to top your ex. Your ex was someone who was very familiar to you. There was comfort there. There was history, nostalgia, and memories. So someone new is immediately going to show you things that you're not going to be comfortable with. You're not going to feel like you have an open heart. You're now probably going to have some trust issues. You're going to be a little bit guarded. So you're not going to let someone in. In fact, you're probably going to fault find more than you're going to allow them in. If you start dating and you don't feel comfortable and it really makes you feel worse, you don't have to do that. You can lean back and give yourself a little more time. When you feel like you want to get in there, and usually it comes from being lonely. Loneliness is the thing that kind of pushes us back into the dating world. Then it's really important to say, okay, I want to recognize what's good about this person, what's going right in this new relationship, rather than try to find fault to keep myself safe. Because you'd be surprised, we now become the person who's a little bit guarded, and we find safety in being single. So try to get to the third date, I like to say. Of course, if the first date they really get to a place where you don't like anything about them, they give you a ton of red flags and you're done with it, then escape. But if they're a nice person and you had a nice time, try to get to a few more dates, because you're naturally going to want to push them away, but really give them a fighting chance. So it's important to say, I need to give this person a fighting chance. Don't look at it like an interview process. Look at it like, I'm just going to go out and have a few laughs. We can have dinner. We can get to know each other, because you may just find a really good friend there too. Someone who also may talk about what they're going through, what they've been through. So give yourself a chance. Don't try to do too much if you don't feel it. You're allowed to take your time. Take as much time as you need.
I love that you said that. Take as much.
Yeah.
And finally, okay, let's say you don't want to go out, you're not in that place anymore, and obviously the next time you wanna date someone, you don't wanna make mistakes, or you don't want it to go wrong this time, right? Because you don't want to get hurt again. So how do you recommend finding yourself after a breakup? Because you become so attached to your ex-partner, everything becomes about them. They become your whole world. So kind of rebuilding yourself. What would be like your tip on that?
Yeah, and I think that's why it is a good idea to stay single just a little bit of time, just so you can rebuild that identity and you get a little comfortable being alone. Because what you want to have in the next relationship is the ability to exit if you need to. So when you stay on your own, even for a little bit of time, to soothe yourself, to regulate, to not look for another person to do that for you, you do get a lot of strength. So when you get into the next relationship, if they start showing the red flags that now you may pick up on a lot sooner, bring
Mhm.
it to conversation. Try to see if you can work through some of those, But if you can't, you will be able to remove yourself from that relationship because you will make it so the next person is not going to be your whole entire world. You learn a lot in that breakup. So you are going to be able to say, I don't think this is going in the right direction. I've kind of seen this before. I need to exit. And another big deal is once you heal just a little,
Mhm.
when you get into that next relationship, you're probably going to have a lot of trust issues. But don't look right away to make that person prove to you who they are and what they're all about. Trust yourself first.
Mhm.
Trust that you can handle if something goes wrong. You've been through a breakup. You know what it feels like. You will absolutely be able to handle that. So trust yourself to make good decisions, to give them a chance to learn a little bit about them, who they are. Let them show you their character, and you'll know. You will absolutely be more on top of picking out things that are not sitting right with you, trusting your instinct and your gut, and being able to exit if you need to exit.
I love that, building trust with yourself and, breakups are like a biggest teachers I feel. So, uh,
Yes.
anyways, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. And,
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me.
like, seriously, what you're doing for people is amazing. That
Oh,
community build is, I found my place there too. So I just want to say,
I am so happy about that. Thank you so much. I really see that that community makes people feel seen and heard and understood. So I'm so glad. That makes me so happy. And I'm so happy to be here.
thank you so much. And this will be recorded and be on YouTube. So I'll be sending you everything. And
Fantastic. I'm so excited. It was so great meeting you. You are amazing.
you're amazing. Thank you. And I hope you have a lovely day ahead.
Thank you. You too. You too. Thanks again. I will talk to you again soon. Bye.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.